Welcome everybody. It's a big pleasure for me to have Uwe here tonight, who's one of the most reputable guys from the Berlin ecosystem, one of the original people at Rocket Internet, who actually was involved in some of the most reputable startup firms himself by incubating Groupon, Wimdu, eDarling, and several other very successful ventures before he actually decided to start his own VC firm with some other people from Rocket Internet, which is Project A Ventures. You of course all know that. It's an operational VC firm, which is a little bit different from many others, so they've really found a strong value proposition and are very close to their founding teams, which is why I believe that having Uwe here tonight is actually a fantastic opportunity to talk a little bit more in detail about what does it mean in order to invest in great teams. So Uwe, welcome.
Thank you, thank you. Thanks very much. Impressive space, so thanks a lot to the guys at McKinsey. I also now understand that the motto is build your own McKinsey. If somebody would have accepted my CV a couple of years back, maybe would have had the chance, but this is my first time to get to experience McKinsey from the inside, so it's not how I pictured it, but
yeah, it's great. It's a fantastic space, I agree. Uwe, throughout your career, being a pure startup guy, you've seen so many different founding teams. So from your perspective, what are some common characteristics among great founders?
So, I mean, in our industry, I mean, you know this as well, and probably you would agree, none of us really knows what they're doing. I think that's a more fundamental truth about startups, that nobody really has a clue, what's going to happen. We don't, we try to predict the future, but it's pretty useless. The best proxy that really have when making an investment decision for the future of a startup, and ultimately the monetary success that has to come through that, is investing in teams. And now that's pretty common wisdom. Yeah, you'll find it on every shitty entrepreneurship blog around the world saying, "Oh yeah, team's so important," but it really is mainly because we don't have anything really substantial that's different than evaluating the teams. And that comes from the fact that really we are sailing into the unknown. All the business cases will be completely useless. Basically, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face, and you get punched in the face quite quickly, and that's when you want to rely on a good team. So that's why we spend a lot of time on that. And now if you go asking the list of criteria, how do we evaluate them? You can easily find a list of like obvious criteria. They should be smart and ambitious and driven and charismatic, and that's probably all not going to be really surprising. I think 2 or 3 things that are maybe still kind of easy to understand but are super important for us. One is, even though they are excellent in what they do, they're probably also good at explaining it to people who have no idea what this is about. And that is a good test because, of course, they need to be experts in their domain and they will spend a lot of time in it and be very deep in the trenches. But people who are really good at explaining and teaching others about what they're doing typically tend to be doing quite well. It has something to do with being able to explain a strategy, to investors, to a company, to your employees, to potential new joiners. I think that's very important.
Let's talk a little bit about what we do day to day. So I understand all those criteria, but how do you test this? Because you have a very limited amount of time available to actually check this out. So what do you do?
So I think we specifically check for one thing in the whole process, which we call, that people have a certain level of intellectual humility. We deal with a lot of people who are super smart, obviously all of them much smarter than we are and experts in their field. But some of the best entrepreneurs we have seen walk into every situation, even, it doesn't matter if it's with a competitor, with a supplier, with an investor, with a team member, with the intern who just had his last day, kind of with an attitude, I can learn something from this. I'm not really sure yet what I'm going to be able to learn, but I don't think I have reached the maximum of savviness, of knowledge already. And that is one very good indicator, and I think you can observe that very well in due diligence. So we're totally fine with people in due diligence approaching this as a very interactive session, asking questions, what do you think about this? That's how we see it. What do you think about it? If we did reference calls, on the business model, on the people asking, so what can we learn from that? Kind of soaking up knowledge. That's typically what separates the great from the good, because separating great from good is, I think, what our business really is about. It's pretty easy to find out early on if an idea is really shitty. So if we get a business case that really is not going to fly, probably we're pretty good at figuring out quickly and providing feedback. But what's super hard is to understand whether this is a good idea or a great idea. And oftentimes, you can't really do that, and you have to rely on the team. And that is one important aspect. So the teaching capability that I said before, that you can just experience yourself, right? Typically, I walk into like a lot of situations saying, hey, just pretend I know nothing about this business and tell me. That's fairly easy for me to pretend because it's actually the truth, right? I have no idea. And sometimes we go like, hey, explain it to me like I'm a 10-year-old. And then we listen and we wait and then we go, okay. Explain to me like I'm a 5-year-old, because you really need to understand, of course, and that is fairly easy to I think to assemble. We pay close attention how people also, like entrepreneurs, treat other people than us around us. We know if somebody was rude to the receptionist. We kind of get that feedback somehow. It's not something that we explicitly ask, but we have a living organization. We have 100 people working in the company, operational experts that work with the team on due diligence, and we get a feeling for how people operate. Now there's always brilliant jerks, right? There's always people who are just brilliant, but they're just really hard to stand. And that is one of the toughest questions probably. How do you deal with those people in your own team when it comes to recruiting and setting up your own team, or when it comes to evaluating investments? You can probably hold the bus. That's what Phil Jackson used to say. You can hold the bus for one guy, right? So there is maybe 1 or 2 people around which you can create a bit of a bubble and protect them if they're weird before it becomes toxic. And that is a tough question when it comes to evaluating investments. I'm sure you've had the same,
sure.
Where people are probably brilliant, but also probably just assholes.
And it becomes even more difficult because several people from different investment teams have different opinions on what they like. So
also
even
true.
though you have a process that helps you to identify the characteristics of a founding team, you will still have your personal taste.
Yeah, of course.
What's your personal taste?
What's my personal taste? I mean, in terms of teams, I like people who I think are super fast learners. I like situations where I don't have to rely on any kind of prediction, but think about people who will just adapt fast enough. And that is much more, yes, of course, you have to have like a certain mental capabilities, but mostly like a willingness to learn. And I think if you approach everything like a little learning experience, then I think that works very well. And that's, by the way, one of the core strengths that Rocket Internet had. An immense learning speed, and I think that's a big task for every entrepreneur who set up his own team, optimized for something that is almost like a organizational metabolism. I think you can say that. Probably native speakers, hopefully you'll understand me. It's like a throughput speed of an organization. Like that is one of the fundamental tasks, I think, of an entrepreneur, of a founder. Am I able to create an organization that is a fast learning organization in general?
Over the last 10 years, you have been involved in the startup scene, roughly, and you've been funding and starting a lot of businesses. So besides
and fucking up a tremendous amount of times.
Of course. And among those skills that you've just mentioned, like being a fast learner, how important is it from your experience to have technical skills as a co-founder?
So like a pretty broad, skill set among a lot of things, and then have specific functional areas in which you're really good. I think we are moving as an industry towards a scenario in which a lot of cool new fields will come into play. I've actually been in this industry for 12 years, shockingly, so it makes me feel very old, but back then we all just built online shops for X, and as we all know, those times are long gone. But suddenly, one of the companies we just invested in is basically in the autonomous driving technology enabling space. And yeah, there's a business guy, but the times of luxury where you could just have a team of 3 generalists kind of tackling the business with like a business school mindset, and it's going to be tough. So I think you have to have this ambition to really create the lower part of the T.
Yeah, I agree. We have one question from Philip, who's from the Startup Notes audience, and he asked if it is a good idea to start a company with a friend.
It's a double-edged sword in a way. It obviously can be fantastic and can be super rewarding, and you're basically building this amazing company with your friend, and you ride off in the sunset with the billions that you made, and it's great. But I think definitely if you want to do that, you have to have some working experience together before. You know, you either should have spent like some super intense times at university, maybe you worked in a similar company before. You should really have tried out how do you work together. And the answer is yes, I think it could be a very cool tool, but make sure that you spend at least 6 months in the trenches together before that. Because once you start, it's kind of worse than a marriage, because you kind of can break, you can divorce, but like it gets messy with a company. You have like hundreds of children.
Let's continue on this point, like starting a company with a friend or not friend, doesn't matter, but like, is there, from your point of view, like what is the perfect split of equity? If you and me would start a company today, so how would you do that?
I think there's 2 ways to do it. I think either you have a situation where there is a very, very clear hierarchy and it's obvious and everybody has no problem accepting that, or you don't, and then you go for equal. I personally like the situations where somehow people are equal and there's like a recognition in this team saying, hey, we're in this together. Everybody of us will give it, as much as they can. Sometimes more, sometimes less. Sometimes people need to take a break and breathe, and we shouldn't get in discussions. Oh, you don't pull your weight. So, for example, if you and I would start a company, I would definitely go for even distribution. Just
Thank
because,
you.
Just because I hope you wouldn't screw me over and demand more than I do. No, because I think it just gives a better energy. If somebody starts a company with a guy, who has IPO'd 3 companies, then maybe it's different. Then it's very different. But if we talk about a setup of people of similar rank, personally, and there's other people who fundamentally disagree with me and think this is a stupid opinion. There's those people who read this book about 3G capital in Brazil. That's kind of like a Bible for people who love meritocracy. And it's all about basically like, it's not stabbing each other in the back, but kind of like if you really want to create a healthy paranoia and competition among people. And that's probably good for some people. I just personally very much like that if you are somewhat on a similar level, let's even it out. And I think it gives, to me personally, it gives a better feeling of, of we're all in the same boat.
No, but I agree on what you're saying. I would do the very same thing. Something that we observe sometimes is that it becomes more difficult to make decisions in a team because, like, it feels like that. Just because you have equal ownership, it means that everybody has the same say, and that of course is a problem. So,
and that is probably that is true. But I think if your decision-making process is down to a situation where it comes down to the voting shares that you have, and you kind of, hey, we should make the decision based on, in the founding team, you have 12%, and those 2 guys have 8%, so you have more. If it comes down to that, I think you have a fundamental problem probably somewhere else anyway, because either you have a decision-making process, and then I think it should be detached from whether it's 12% or 7% or 6%.
No, I agree, very true. Speaking of equity, what do you do in order to attract new talent? So let's talk a little bit about ESOP. What is a good size for an ESOP pool? Yeah. How would you distribute that? Do you offer everyone ESOP? Do you just give ESOP to special people? Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about that. So
it's a very good question.
It's science. It's a little bit of science as well.
It's a little bit of science, and also probably some dark magic somewhere in there. I think that the book on the topic was written by the guys from Index Ventures. I'm sure if you Google a little bit, then they did the best quantitative study. I think it's always a good idea to be generous on the ESOP pool for companies. If a company comes with 10-15% of ESOP pool, we don't see it as a negative, rather as a positive. I think in Germany we still have a culture among employees that people don't really get yet what ESOP, really means. People sometimes are a bit suspicious of it and think, okay, am I being screwed here? Do they just want to take away some of my salary? So it's a bit of a complicated issue. I think ultimately hopefully we'll move into the direction where companies basically are able to distribute ownership among a lot of people. It has some problems, as I'm sure you know, with the German tax system and stuff like that. So I hope this will change eventually, because I think it's going to be great. I think in Germany we are lagging behind some other companies, some other countries where we see every employee basically gets ownership. We don't have that appreciation yet for that topic in Germany. I think it's probably starting to grow. And I think the takeaway is to be generous, and if you can attract people for whom generally ESOP is a good thing, you should be happy. And you should be very happy to give this out. And the calculation is quite simple. You know, if you just take the dilution for your package, and if you don't believe that person will create that incremental amount of value, then probably it's not a good hire. And most of the times you'll probably come to the conclusion that, wow, that's awesome. You know, this person is going to make me richer. I definitely have to hire her or him.
How do you see the role of the CEO? So common wisdom says that a CEO has like certain functionalities and he does maybe a little bit of strategy, hiring, whatever. So how do you see that?
Yeah, so the classic three are, you know, you have to provide vision for the company to make sure that everybody sits in the same boat, rows the same direction, and knows what they're doing. There's a couple of methods, you know, whether it's OKRs, or just people are some, you know, very good communicators about what the vision of the company is. You have to make sure there's money in the bank, right? Because that's also your legal duty, at least in Germany, that if you don't have this, you have to file for insolvency, and that's only one of the very few things where you can really fuck up and go to jail. So that's really something very important. And then third is hiring. And I think that is probably, you know, something that is a bit surprising for people, but as a CEO, I think it's totally fine to spend 30% of your time on hiring, on recruiting. And that is not just walking in, you know, some interviews and do half-hour checks with some people whether they fit the company, but it's, I think, about working to get the really best people, those hires that everybody will go like, how the fuck did this person, you know, be convinced to join this company? This is a rock star. What does he do with a startup? Those are the kind of hires you have to go for, and nobody else can do that except you. And sometimes probably it's a month, you know, it's a process of many months. I think that's what a CEO should focus a lot on. And then I think part of the vision part is what I mentioned earlier. Think about how can you really make this a high performance organization? How can you make sure that the metabolism of processing information, turning it into action, measuring again, getting more information, and this feedback loop, what Rocket was able to do with a couple of companies, get them in a super aggressive hyper learning mode, making sure that you have a company culture that says, we've been doing this for years until yesterday. I mean, if you build up an organization in which you micromanage, then you'll attract people who like to be micromanaged. In the long
You don't
run.
want to work with these people?
I guess not, no.
Yeah, Uwe, it was a lot of fun starting a company with you today and being your
absolutely.
co-founder. Thank you very much for this great
Thank
session. I had a lot of fun, and yeah, thanks.
Well, thanks very much for having me. We'll try to be helpful as much as we can. If there's anything we can do, please reach out. We'll try to stick around some more, but it's a great format, so thank you very much to all of the organizers. I think it's important that there's people here who try to, you know, really give first, give a couple of times, dozens of times first before they ask for something. I think that's what makes an ecosystem strong. So thank you very much to all of you who came. Thank you very much to all of you who organized. Of course, also thank you to you for doing this.
Thank you.